At approximately 9:15 a.m. on May 23, 1934, six men waited as a vehicle slowed to approach a fellow driver parked on the shoulder of Louisiana State Highway 154 south of Gippsland. Suicide Sal, as newspapers dubbed her, was heard to scream as her lover was shot fatally in the head by one of the officers concealed in the bushes. Suddenly, all six officers fired 130 rounds into the stolen Ford V8 that came to a stop about 50 yards from the posse. After officers emptied the last round into the getaway car, the group approached. The officers inspected the vehicle and discovered an arsenal of weapons, including stolen automatic rifles, sawed-off semi-automatic shotguns, assorted handguns, several thousand rounds of ammunition, and 15 sets of license plates from various states. 2 weeks before Suicide Sal would write to her mother, pinning her fate, writing, "Someday they'll go down together. They'll bury them side by side. To few it will be grief, to the law a relief, but it's death for Bonnie and Clyde." Today we look at the final days of Bonnie and Clyde. Bonnie Parker was a petite girl, only 4'11" and weighing 90 pounds. With her strawberry blonde curls, Bonnie was described as very pretty. She was born on October 1st, 1910 in Rowena, Texas. She was the second of three children to Henry and Emma Parker. She did well in school and loved writing poetry. In her second year in high school, Parker met Roy Thornton. The couple dropped out of school and married on September 25, 1926, 6 days before her 16th birthday. Their marriage was marred by his frequent absences and brushes with the law, which proved to be short-lived. They never divorced, but their paths never crossed again after January 1929. Parker was still wearing Thornton's wedding ring when she died. Thornton was in prison when he heard of her death, commenting, "I'm glad they jumped out like they did. It's much better than being caught." Separating from her husband, Parker moved back in with her mother and worked as a waitress in Dallas. One of her regular customers was postal worker Ted Hinton. In 1932, he joined the Dallas County Sheriff's Department and eventually served as a posse member that killed Bonnie and Clyde. Parker briefly kept a diary early in 1929 when she was 18, writing of her loneliness, her impatience with life in Dallas, and her love of photography. Several accounts describe Parker and Barrow's first meeting. The most credible states that they met on January 5, 1930, at the home of Barrow's friend Clarence Clay at 105 Herbert Street in West Dallas. Barrow was 20 years old and Parker was 19. Parker was out of work and staying with a friend to assist in recovery from a broken arm. Barrow dropped by at the girl's house while Parker made hot chocolate in the kitchen. Both were smitten immediately. Most historians believe that Parker joined Barrow because she had fallen in love with him. Clyde Chestnut Barrow was an attractive man with thick brown hair and around 5'4". Bonnie remained his loyal companion as they committed their many crimes and awaited the violent death they viewed as inevitable. I'm going to skip over the details of Clyde Barrow and the Barrow gang. There's a lot of information out there, and honestly, I don't have enough time on this video. So I'm going to fast forward to the month of May 1934. Now, the Barrow gang consists of Bonnie Parker, Clyde Barrow, Clyde's older brother Marvin Buck Barrow, Buck Barrow's wife Blanche Barrow, Debbie D. Jones, Henry Methvin, Raymond Hamilton, Joe Palmer, and Ralph Foltz. By May, Barrow has 16 warrants outstanding against him for multiple counts of robbery, auto theft, escape, assault, murder in 4 states. Frank Hamer, who had begun tracking the gang on February 12th, led the posse. He had studied the gang's movements and found that they swung in a circle skirting the edges of 5 Midwestern states, exploiting the state line rule, which prevented officers from pursuing a fugitive into another jurisdiction. Barrow was consistent in his movements, so Hammer charted his path and predicted where he would go. The gang's itinerary centered on family visits, and they were due to see Methvin's family in Louisiana. Hammer's posse was composed of 6 men: Texas officers Hammer, Hinton Alcorn, and B.M. Manny Golt, and Louisiana officers Henderson Jordan and Prentice Morrell Oakley. At 9:15 a.m. on May 23, 1934, the posse was still concealed in the bushes and almost ready to give up when they heard a vehicle approaching at high speed. In their official report, they stated they had persuaded Methvin to position his truck on the shoulder of the road that morning. They hoped Barrow would stop to speak with him, putting his vehicle close to the posse's position in the bushes. The vehicle proved to be the Ford V8 with Barrow at the wheel, and he slowed down as hoped. The 6 lawmen opened fire while the vehicle was still moving. Oakley fired first, probably before any order to do so. Barrow was shot in the head and died instantly for Oakley's first shot, and Hinton reported hearing Parker scream. The officers fired about 130 rounds, emptying each of the weapons into the car. The official reports by the parish coroner, J. L. Wade, listed 17 entrance wounds on Barrow's body and 26 on that of Parker, including several headshots to each, and another severed Barrow's spinal column. Henry Barrow identified his son's body, then sat weeping in a rocking chair. Bonnie and Clyde wished to be buried side by side, but the Parker family would not allow it. More than 20,000 attended Parker's funeral, and her family had difficulty reaching her gravesite. Parker's services were held on May 26th. Dr. Alan Campbell recalled that flowers came from everywhere, including some with cards allegedly from Pretty Boy Floyd and John Dillinger. The largest Florida tribute was sent by a group of Dallas City newsboys. The sudden end of Bonnie and Clyde sold 500,000 newspapers in Dallas alone. Parker was buried in the Fishtrap Cemetery, although her body was moved in 1945 to the new Crown Hill Cemetery in Dallas. Thousands of people gathered outside both Dallas funeral homes, hoping for a chance to view the bodies. Barrow's private funeral was held at sunset on May 25th. He was buried in Western Heights Cemetery in Dallas, next to his brother Marvin. The Barrow brothers share a single granite marker with their names on it and an epitaph selected by Clyde, "Gone but not forgotten." In February 1935, Dallas and federal authorities arrested and tried 20 family members and friends for aiding and abetting Barrow and Parker. This became known as a harboring trial, and all 20 either pleaded guilty or were found guilty. The 2 mothers were jailed for 30 days. Other sentences ranged from 2 years imprisonment for Floyd Hamilton, brother Raymond, to 1 hour in custody for Barrow's teenage sister Marie. Other defendants included Blanche Jones, Methvin, and Parker's sister Billy. Blanche was permanently blinded in her left eye during the 1933 shootout at Dexfield Park. She was taken into custody on a charge of assault with intent to kill. She was convicted and sentenced to 10 years in prison, but was paroled in 1939 for good behavior. She returned to Dallas, leaving her life of crime in the past, and lived with her invalid father as his caregiver. In 1940, she married Eddie Frazier, worked as a taxicab dispatcher and a beautician, and completed the terms of her parole 1 year later. She lived in peace with her husband until he died of cancer in 1969. She died from cancer at age 77 on December 24, 1988, and was buried in Dallas's Grove Hill Memorial Park under the name Blanche B. Frazier. Barrow cohorts Hamilton and Palmer, who escaped Eastham in January 1934, were recaptured. Both were convicted of murder and executed in the electric chair at Huntsville, Texas on May 10, 1935. Jones had left Barrow and Parker 6 weeks after the 3 of them evaded officers at Dexfield Park in July 1933. He reached Houston and got a job picking cotton, where he was soon discovered and captured. He was returned to Dallas, where he dictated a confession in which he claimed to have been kept a prisoner by Barrow and Parker. Jones was convicted of the murder of Doyle Johnson and served a lenient sentence of 15 years.